Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to start before we do the program to say a word about whose world we're in. He's just wandering around.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Get a lasso.
Anyway, we are fortunate enough to be in the territory of the Samish Native Sovereign Nation, and they have been a very welcoming group of people and have treated us with respect, and we should treat them with respect as well. And so on behalf of the Samish, Ayishka Sesiam, welcome. Thank you. Now, I'm going to start this presentation. I'm going to try to read with the microphone. It may all not work.
But you're gonna do it.
Tracy, I'd like to say a few words
Well,
first.
let's go for it. Yeah. Okay.
First of all, it's really my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, which is the person who started the No More Bombs group. I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago. I can't really recall. It was before COVID. But Tracy Powell had an ad in the paper about people interested in world peace, interested in abolishing nuclear weapons, come to a meeting here, and a lot of us did, and a lot of us at the end of that meeting answered the call to support Tracy and to form a group locally to promote world peace and nuclear disarmament. And I'm happy that a lot of those people are here tonight, and we'll introduce them a little bit later.
Yeah.
But Tracy started his peak peace activism in 1967 when he refused the draft. If you recall, actually I was sent up for a physical to go 1A. Anyway, Tracy refused to go in the service. Since then, he's been a real historian, so I'd say a 20th century historian. He's done a lot of reading and studying on world history, and then kind of shifted his interest to conflicts, and then shifted his interest to nuclear weapons and how that affects the world and the threats that it poses. So Tracy Powell is our spiritual leader. I call him our guru, and it's my pleasure to introduce him tonight. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, bud. We'll see how this goes. There is a new arms race going on. I don't know if anybody noticed it or not, but our country is leading the way as usual, building more bombs, bigger bombs, better bombs. And as a result of that, all the other nuclear armed countries are doing the same. This is the state of affairs at the moment. You can see the United States and Russia have between them over 10,000 nuclear weapons. I should be reading, sorry. This is the state of play at the moment, but everything's changing. About 1,400 of our weapons are on hair trigger status. Most of those are in the nuclear silos in the Midwest, the ICBMs. The warheads are already loaded on those things, and it just takes a click of a button to launch them. And when they launch, you can't call them back. It's not like an airplane or a ship or anything like that. Russia's got similar amounts. You can see down here, these are the deployed. Oh crap, I better quit using that. Anyway, the bottom of those columns is the deployed ones. Those are the ones that are ready to go on hair trigger. This is an investment strategy that our country has committed to, starting in 2011. And it's projected to cost over 30 years $1.7 trillion. And you can see things that we're gonna get new. We're gonna get over 100 new strategic bombers, 100 or 1,000 new long-range standoff weapons, and these are cruise missiles that are launched from those bombers. Down in the sea category, they're going to replace all of the Trident submarines with a whole new class of submarines, a dozen of them, and new warheads to go with them. And then there's the sea-launched cruise missile, which will be also a cruise missile to be launched from a submarine. They don't have these yet. Anyway, that's the plan. And this is how this came about. The New START, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, had been signed with Russia back in the 90s, and it was expiring in 2010. Congress was not willing to commit to any more reductions because the weapons manufacturers were complaining they weren't getting enough business. And so the Obama administration made a deal with Congress that they would fund a brand new set of weapons if Congress would sign the treaty with Russia. And from that point on, we've been doing just that. As a result, the threat of intentional or accidental nuclear war has just gone up. And on top of that, we've applied more pressure to Russia because of the NATO expansion. NATO was founded in 1949 specifically to challenge Russia, and has taken several years, several decades for all the European countries to fill in the map up against Russia's border. And now we're there. This is, okay, I'm going to play this little video. This is what could happen.
What would happen if there was a full-scale nuclear war between Russia and the United States? Based on non-classified data, the aftermath might go something like this. When one side launches nuclear missiles, the other side detects them and fires back before impact. U.S. submarine-launched ballistic missiles from west of Norway start striking Russia after about 10 minutes, and Russian ones from north of Canada start hitting the U.S. a few minutes later. The very first strikes are high-altitude EMP attacks, frying electronics and power grids by creating an electromagnetic pulse of tens of thousands of volts per meter. The next strikes target command and control, as well as nuclear launch facilities. Land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles take about half an hour to arrive. Major cities are targeted, both because they contain military facilities and to stymie the enemy's post-war recovery. Some cruise missiles take hours to reach their target. Each impact creates a fireball about as hot as the core of the sun, followed by a radioactive mushroom cloud. These intense explosions vaporize people nearby and cause fires and blindness further away. The fireball expansion then causes a blast wave that damages buildings, crushing nearby ones. The United Kingdom and France have nuclear capabilities and are obliged by NATO's Article 5 to defend the US. So Russia hits them too. Firestorms engulf many cities, where storm-level winds fan the flames, igniting anything that can burn, melting glass and some metals, and turning asphalt into flammable hot liquid. But the explosions, the electromagnetic pulse, and the radioactivity aren't the worst part. Nuclear winter is, caused by the black carbon smoke from the nuclear firestorms. The Hiroshima atomic bomb caused such a firestorm, but today's hydrogen bombs are much more powerful. A large city like Moscow, with almost 50 times more people, can create much more smoke. And a firestorm sends plumes of black smoke up into the stratosphere, far above any rain clouds that would otherwise wash out the smoke. This black smoke gets heated by sunlight, lofting it like a hot air balloon for up to a decade. High-altitude jet streams are so fast that it takes only a few days for the smoke to spread across much of the northern hemisphere. In the meantime, Earth gets freezing cold, even during the summer, with farmland in Kansas cooling by about 20 degrees centigrade or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and other regions cooling almost twice as much. A recent scientific paper estimates that over 5 billion people could starve to death, including around 99% of those in the United States, Europe, Russia, and China. We obviously don't know how many people will survive a nuclear war. But if it's even remotely as bad as scientists think, then it has no winners, merely losers. It's easy to feel powerless, but the good news is that there is something you can do to help. Please share this video, because the more people know about nuclear war, the less likely it is that we'll start one.
We kind of have to believe that, don't we? Yeah. So this is what we're doing, shown in a different kind of a graph. You can see the new submarines, the new bombers, the new ICBMs, the new long-range standoff missiles. Each has a pretty hefty price tag. And then down that big blue bar, those are one-year figures. That's a 25-year figure, I think. National Nuclear Security Agency, that's the office that runs all this stuff. It's a joint venture between the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. So $1.7 trillion just for modernization, on top of approximately $45 billion every year, just to keep up with the current inventories of our nuclear weapons. This list from Don't Bank on the Bombs, which is one of my favorite websites, shows the 25 top nuclear weapons producers. I think this list is about a year old, probably hasn't changed much. Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Bechtel, Fluor, and Honeywell are just some of the American companies that are making money off of this. Too big a thing to deal with, right? Well, not really. Don't Bank on the Bomb is a bunch of financial wizards, and they have figured out how to do divestment. Individual people and corporations and foundations. If you go to their website and you're serious, you can go find out how to get rid of any stocks and bonds that you may have that are part of these companies. Any person, company, or investment fund who owns a share in any of these manufacturers and their supporting companies is contributing to building and distributing these weapons. Maybe they don't fire them, but they build them. But are we also responsible for the destruction these weapons inflict on people and future generations in the environment? If this is something that would bother somebody, divestment is the way to back away from that. Code Pink is another organization that has been working on this for a long time. But as groups, what can we do? Groups like this. Depends on how deeply we each want to get involved. But there are many opportunities, and the choices have multiplied in the last few years. More and more corporations and foundations and think tanks are doing stuff that they want us to get involved in. And they're getting a lot of support from the United Nations and the International Court of Justice. You may remember that the United Nations formed after World War II. The first order of business, when they first had their first General Assembly, was to establish the first committee, which was specifically designed to deal with nuclear weapons and preventing the next World War. This is a network. This is a very clumsy diagram. Anyway, way up in the upper left corner is the group of heroes, in my mind, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. A lot of these ladies were nurses. They formed in 1915 in the midst of World War I with a specific mission to stop the next one and heal all the damage that was being done in Europe. Most of these ladies were from the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, and they expanded worldwide, and they've been at it ever since. One of the most prolific and brilliant writers that I've ever read is a woman named Ray Atchison, who is now their spokesperson and writes prolifically books and articles. Anyway, if you ever get a chance to read anything by Ray Atchison, please do. And down below the Women's International League, the United Nations, as we just mentioned, was founded in 1945 specifically to prevent world wars. Below that, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War were inspired by both of those other organizations, and they established in 1980. They in turn spawned the Physicians for Social Responsibility, the United States chapter, was founded in 1961. And the ones that I pay most attention to, because my grandparents were Quakers, is the American Friends Service Committee. They started also during World War I. In 1943, in the middle of World War II, the Friends Committee on National Legislation was formed. This is a body of people motivated by conscience to lobby Congress and their local legislators and mayors and council people to do whatever they could to work for peace. They also are one of our mentor groups. Anyway, all these groups finally got together, and leading up to 2017, there was a series of treaties, international treaties, that were sanctioned by the United Nations, banning such things as cluster munitions, landmines, and chemical weapons. And up until 2017, nuclear weapons were still legal in international law. Well, that's where the TPNW comes in. It prohibits, by law, nuclear weapons, period. So this is what we are all working for, to get the TPNW accepted worldwide. Down in the corner, there's a list of the small local peace groups: Ground Zero Center, Nuclear Voices, Code Pink, Hanford Challenge, Nuke Watch New Mexico, Golden Rule, that's the Peace Boat, Veterans for Peace, Downwinders, Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, Olympia Peace and Justice, Glenn Anderson's group, Whatcom Peace and Justice, Pax Christi, and us, No More Bombs. So let's take a break from me, and if anybody here would like to speak for No More Bombs, you could introduce yourself, or Bud would introduce you.
Yeah, certainly. Let me start off by saying Bud Anderson, and the reason I joined this group is I consider myself an amateur historian. I just really enjoy reading history, 20th century history. And the more and more I read, the more more and more I'm convinced that this information about nuclear weapons needs to be made public. We need to know the full and complete story, the transparent story. Because when you follow the history, there's no reason that nuclear weapons should have been developed, and there's no reason they should have been used. So if any of you attended the Oppenheimer film, Oppenheimer sort of came to the same conclusion after he worked on developing the bomb, that he pretty much worked for peace after that, and he saw the consequences of it. So anyway, that's why I got involved, because I've done a lot of studying, and it's a dead-end road. When you study what's going on at Hanford, that area will never be cleaned up. There is just an enormous amount of contamination there that's slowly getting in through the ground, and when it gets down, I think it's 8 feet, it reaches the groundwater, which will go right directly to the Columbia River, and there's no way to stop it. It'll be kind of like Fukushima on steroids. We're now, you know, have you ever seen pictures of Fukushima in the last few months? I mean, it's just this tank farm, hundreds of tanks. They're all full. What are they doing now? They're dumping the waste into the ocean. So we just can't get there. We have to stop this insanity. Anyway, that's how I got involved. My wife, Jackie, she buys me books, and so she keeps me on the path. So, Julia, you've been a long time peace activist. Do you want to just mention about your history?
Sure, yeah. I was active when Skagit Citizens for Nuclear Disarmament was active, and the Skagit Peace Education Fund. It's just an issue that is under the radar too much, and it's such a powerful threat, so that's why I'm in it.
Okay, no, that's great. Appreciate that. And Wim, your thoughts?
My main thought is that nuclear weapons are not about a war between America and Russia, meaning they are the countries that have the most of these weapons. It's really when something happens, the rest of the world, all the countries that don't want nuclear weapons, that don't have them, all the other countries are being victims of anything happening between America and Russia. So the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons really is a strong voice, the only voice all these other countries have, and it should be listened to.
And certainly endorse that. Kathleen, what brought you into our group?
You know, I think I came to a meeting pre-COVID here at the library, and I heard Tracy talk. And then I went home and I reread John Hersey's Hiroshima. And it's a huge, I mean, it's such a big issue. I went, oh, now, come on, what are we going to do? But I thought, you know, doing nothing is worse than doing a little bit. So that's how I got involved.
And thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. And our newest member, the star, Bill.
The star. My name's Bill Johnson. I'm fairly new to the group. I went to the Mount Vernon Farmers Market, and you guys were tabling there, and I signed up for it. The reason I signed up is, oh, by the way, I'm a member of the group, and I maintain the website.
Very well.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Of which this will be on it. Two reasons why I signed up. One of them is financial. The other one is because of accidents. I don't want the 1.7 trillion dollars to go into nuclear weapons. I'd rather it go into something that's more useful. The other thing is accidents. There's been so many. There's a listing that you put on the website when you were doing it that shows a lot of the accidents that have already happened, a bunch of them. One of them, just to make an example, back in the 60s, when the Cold War was going on, everybody was afraid of nuclear war. We thought that Russia was going to launch at us, so our government started Operation Chrome Dome. If you've never heard of it, you can Google it, Operation Chrome Dome. They had 12 or 15 B-52s, nuclear equipped, in the air at all times for a whole decade. So if they launched, we could retaliate. But with that many planes in the air, it's probably going to be an accident. And there were a few. One of them, that's an example, was over Thule Air Base in Greenland in the 60s, 1968. This plane was up there, they're flying around, it's in January, dark, 24 hours a day. It's minus 60 outside, and they had a fire on board. They tried to put the fire out and they couldn't get it out. So all they did is they headed for the lights of Thule. When they got over it, the guy said jump and they all bailed. The B-52 continued north. Eventually it started circling around, came back and crashed 7.5 miles away from Thule Air Base. And there were more than 1,000 people at this base. They caught fire, melted through the ice, 4 nuclear weapons and parts of the airplane all sunk to the bottom. Took 4 months for them to clean up the whole area. The reason I bring that up is because 15 years later, I got a job at Thule. And I spent 18.5 months there living and working, 7.5 miles away from a nuclear accident site. So I think back about that, and I think these accidents, it became real for me. So.
That, very interesting story. I knew about Thule. I didn't know you were there, but that's, we're going to be talking about that later.
Yes.
I am also very aware of that accident, but I thought that one of the weapons was never recovered, but we'll discuss that.
I heard that also.
Yeah.
Depending on where you look, it's a different story.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for bringing that up. That's, wow. For joining. Okay, so this is who we are. This is our coalition that we're getting more and more active with. Positions for social responsibility have founded this coalition. You notice down here at the bottom of the page, it says sign our petition. Well, we've got paper copies of that petition here. And I just talked to Sean Ahrens today, the fellow who's managing this coalition at the moment, and asked him, was there any difference between signing the petition in paper or online? He says, well, it's a lot easier online. That's true. This doesn't open you up to fan mail or solicitations or anything like that. It doesn't share your name with anybody. And actually, they haven't decided what they're going to do with these petitions because they've been passing them out at meetings like this and tabling events in social events around the state. And they're just gathering them up. And they'll eventually decide whether to take them all to Patty Murray or all the legislators. Anyway, it's a good thing to do and it's easy. And as Julia mentioned, it's a lot easier if you do it online. Some people might misspell something, or if I was filling that thing out on paper, it'd be illegible. So it doesn't do quite as much good that way. These are some of our dearest friends. Ground Zero is the base right next to Bangor, and they actually got started building the base while Bangor was being built. They're part of a big movement back in the 80s, late 70s and 80s, that my mom was also a part of down on the Columbia River. The White Trains, I don't know if you've heard of the White Trains. Those are the ones bringing the nuclear weapons from back east to stock the submarines at Bangor. Anyway, they're a great group of people. This is not the prettiest picture to put up for them, but it's a good cartoon. The other group on this page is from Hiroshima to Hope. and a lot of us folks have been to their August 6th commemorations at Green Lake. They do this every summer, and the picture there is of the lanterns floating on the lake as a memorial offering to those who were killed and injured and made sick and their survivors. These are both good groups to give money to. And there are more. Like mentioned before, the American Friends Service Committee has been around since World War I. The Friends Committee on National Legislation hasn't been around quite that long, but they are the political action wing of the Quaker movement. And they're an awesome source of information about the bills going through Congress and the shenanigans going on there. Hanford Challenge is a wonderful group. They monitor what's going on over at Hanford, and they have published some of the most brilliant papers. They do great research. They find information from sources all over the place. Nuclear Voices, I have to put this in because Lily Adams, who was the first liaison for the coalition, founded this. She also works for the Union of Concerned Scientists, a brilliant lady. Warheads to Windmills is a separate coalition of some of the same groups that we are also hooked up with through our coalition. And they are proposing a big program of defunding warheads and specifically reprogramming the money for environmental causes, which is a great thing. And these are just some of the scientific organizations that I subscribe to their newsletters and I read their websites. And anyway, like Bill mentioned, this whole thing's going to be on our website. All of the links on here are active. If you look at this on the website and you want to travel off to any of these other groups, it's easy to do. Okay, we're back to the treaty. The international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons produced the treaty, was adopted at the United Nations in 3 separate sessions in 2017, and opened for signatures. Over the next 4 years, they got 92 nations to sign it. 68 of those nations, besides signing it, they actually took it back to their legislative bodies and ratified it. They promised that they would be a part of it. And Reaching Critical Will is the disarmament division of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. They have influenced this whole process, working with ICANN all these years. This is the treaty. Prior to its adoption, nuclear weapons were the only weapons of mass destruction that were not subject to a comprehensive ban. The others were landmines, cluster munitions, and chemical weapons. They were all banned by this same movement sponsored by the United Nations. And it's a very comprehensive ban. Prohibits nations from developing, testing, producing, manufacturing, transferring, possessing, stockpiling, using, or threatening to use nuclear weapons, or allowing somebody else's weapons to be stationed on their territory. And it prohibits them from helping anybody to do those things. A nation that already has nuclear weapons, and there are 9 of them, could join the treaty so long as they promise to destroy theirs. Simple as that. So it is open to the United States. All nations are obliged to provide assistance to victims in the territories of nuclear weapons testing and use. And the preamble acknowledges, this is very important, the harm suffered as a result of nuclear weapons, including the disproportionate impact on women and girls and on indigenous peoples around the world. as Bud pointed out, is something that was completely neglected in the Oppenheimer movie. The treaty was negotiated in March, June, and July 2017 with more than 135 nations talking about it. And since then, 92 nations signed it and 68 ratified. The ratified countries are the ones that have already committed. Their internal legislative and administrative structure has already committed to observing this. And if you notice, Kazakhstan, which used to have Soviet weapons, and Mongolia, both of which are right next door to Russia, they've signed this. They've promised never to do this and to help the rest of the world get rid of their nuclear weapons. So how do we get involved? Seems like we're a long ways from the UN. There are lots of campaigns. Every one of the groups that we've talked about here has a campaign going on someplace at some level to promote the TPNW. And all of them have ways that we can hook up as individuals or as a group to get on the bandwagon. There are some things in our Congress, HRES 77, HR 2775, and there's no Senate equivalent to that. And there are a few of these other ones. I'm going to go through these things next. House Res 77 calls on the President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, leaders of Congress, this is verbatim from the resolution, and the American people to embrace the TPNW and pledge to pursue a new nuclear arms control agreement with Russia, China, and all the other nations, renounce first use, end the President's sole authority, take all nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert status, and cancel the modernization program. Now these points, you probably heard them all listed before. 5 years ago or so, another group put forth a Back from the Brink series of legislations, which didn't go anywhere in Congress, but they grouped these 5 points together. And at the moment, this is not a bill, it's just a statement of belief. And there's no equivalent thing in the Senate. 36 representatives actually co-sponsored this back in January, and the only one that we're close to is Pramila Jayapal. So if you want to reach out to somebody local and say, thank you, what can we do to help? I think she would be a good place to start. HR 2775 is also a Back from the Brink type of resolution, and this one is sponsored several sessions in a row by the DC delegate, Eleanor Holmes. And also there's no equivalent to this in the Senate. But the process, it's a rather long bill. The process that it lays out is just like the windmills, Warheads to Windmills campaign. Now these are the only two that are actually being discussed in Congress. Senate just came back into session, the House will in another week. And it just deals with one point of the Back from the Brink group, restricting first use. This is something we should be talking about with our representative, Rick Larson. We can probably guess what his first reaction is. And our Senators Murray and Cantwell. These are things we can actually do as individuals or as a group. The other one, and this is not in the state of actually having bills to endorse yet, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, which was first passed in 1990, was to reimburse financially some people who were sickened by uranium mining and testing. And as you can see on the map there, the blue parts of Nevada, those were the downwinders from the nuclear tests, and we actually did a whole lot of atmospheric testing in Nevada, which contaminated a whole lot of people, and most of them didn't even know about it. But you can also see that, it also was to compensate industrial workers in Utah, Nevada, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Guam, and the military participants in the cleanup of Enewetak Atoll in the Marshall Islands. But no residents of the Marshall Islands were ever included in this bill. And you can see the numbers are not very big. 50,000 individuals working downwind of the Nevada test site, 75,000 for workers that participated in those tests, mostly military folks, and 100,000 for uranium miners and ore transporters. Anyway, this program is expiring right now, and Congress is talking about it, but they're not talking very seriously. And if it expires, they would have to create a whole new bill. One of the most important things I think that a new version of this bill should have in it is some compensation for the folks in the Marshall Islands who live there and are still trying to live there. Anyway, one more thing to contact Congress about. It's a big job, but there's a lot of people working on it, and we can hook up with any of them that we feel like, and they will all help us. It's tough, many obstacles, and any benefits go to people we don't know. So let's do it anyway. Thank you. Questions? Ideas? Kathleen?
Well, so what's the hope of the U.S. ever signing that treaty, is what I want to know.
My gut reaction is never. I don't think I can live with it. I think a lot of us feel the same way. We grew up in this country. We know that it's a narcissistic country determined to dominate the world. And we know that it's also run by business. Money doesn't talk, it swears. That's why it's such a tough problem. And I don't really know if we'll ever solve it, but if we don't try, we know it's not going to be solved. That's why this networking is so important. All these groups have just ramped up their efforts and their commitment over the last decade. 10 years ago, you could hardly find a group that you could reach out to for advice and information, let alone something you could get involved in. It's much different now. It's much better. A lot of these groups are kind of tripping over each other because there's no single organization. That Warheads to Windmills group, they have formed a coalition of a lot of the same groups that make up the WPSR and the ICANN. And that'll work out. I mean, we've got to sort these things out and keep moving. but if we don't try, how are we gonna tell our great-grandkids? I don't know, Kathleen, I really.
Yeah, well, I don't expect you to have a magic answer.
Yeah.
On the TPNW, how many countries have now signed it?
90-some have signed it and 60-some have ratified.
And so when does it become international law?
It is international law for those who have ratified it. It doesn't affect the armed nations until they actually get involved. And the hope is, the hope in the ICANN organization was that enough countries would ratify, that they would start putting pressure as a country on the other countries that aren't. For example, Turkey, of course, did not sign this because they have a lot of our nukes. We have our weapons base there and our military staffs based there. But they are very close to Russia. They're also very close to Iran, and they're scared to death of both of those countries. It would be in their interest to disarm and make themselves less of a target. Turkey, if it had leadership that was committed, they could give us back our nukes or help us destroy them over there. That would be a big step. The way we're expanding NATO, Finland and Sweden joined this year. They're right up against Russia. All the other Eastern European countries have already gone in except for Ukraine and Belarus, both of which used to have Russian nukes. Now they don't have them anymore, but they're still there.
Some of these groups. But as individuals, we can of course write to our representatives and
Yes.
senators.
Yes.
As a group, would that be worthwhile, writing as a group to our legislators?
Yeah, I think so. There are, all of these groups like the coalition have pre-printed responses to all of these things that we could just sign on as a group. And I've done that in some of them. Taken the liberty of speaking for the group. But it means a lot more if you write your own letter, your neighbor writes a letter with your own words, and delivered in person. That's the most effective way. But anywhere in that continuum, whatever way we can share our voices with our people in Congress or the state legislators. Our state has a huge investment in nuclear weapons. Bangor, Boeing, Fairchild, Lewis McChord, NAS Whidbey. All of these places are committed to promoting the use of nuclear weapons, whether they say that or not. They're all part of the program. And so the legislators representing, like Rick Larson, representing those bases and those constituents, they have to be informed that not everybody is in favor of those things, where they may reflect who they are.
So Teresa, I'll just say one, I think, practical step back, since we have to take a 100-step back,
Yeah.
would be removing nuclear weapons from Russia's doorstep. I mean, that's got to be really threatening. For example, you commented that weapons are based in Turkey, and of course they're based in Germany,
Yeah.
England, so they're based around the Russian frontier. And to me, if it's that short a fuse, if it's a 20-minute or 15-minute or 10-minute fuse between launch, like if you launch from Turkey, from Moscow, it's probably 10 minutes. Well, that gives very little time for Putin and his friends to analyze what's going on.
Yeah.
And so the chances of escalation just increase enormously. I think one of the first steps should be get the weapons away from the doorstep. For example, when I was when 63 and Khrushchev was going to put missiles in Cuba,
Yeah.
and that was just this horrible, scary thing. Well, look at it in reverse.
Yeah.
Why should we have missiles in Turkey if in fact Russia, so we need to not be so threatening to Russia from a nuclear attack point of view.
That's
I
right.
think that's a first step.
We're trying now to put missiles in South Korea and Japan.
Well, that'll make China real happy.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's really provocation.
Yeah.
It's totally illogical.
Yeah.
And
And Australia. Australia now wants to buy some of our bombers and our missiles so they can help us. Yeah. Yeah. We're
so
moving in
anyway,
the
writing
right
the
direction.
Congressman, I think mentioning that as a first practical step would be good. I mean, we can still annihilate the world, right? We still have.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not saying we're there yet, but I just imagine people making a decision in 10 minutes is, you're asking a lot.
Well, now that we're all depressed.
I know.
Well, it feels like if you write a congressman, you wanna make this list, vote for this, don't vote for this, don't keep spending money on them, and, you could write 10 letters, or you could write one letter and list all 10 things. I don't know.
Or you could write a letter a day for a year.
Yeah. Do that.
I don't know these folks, whether they get encouraged by praise or if they get discouraged by criticism to where they shut us out, or will they ever listen? I don't have a clue. That's what this coalition is supposed to be doing for us, is to helping us find ways to communicate with the people in government.
That's what we're doing on September 26th, maybe.
Maybe.
Right.
What do you want to tell us about your next presentation?
Sure. Anthony's laughing because I've planned on this for many years. So I want
You
to.
committed yourself.
I did.
Right,
Now I'm trying to think now, how's this going to happen?
Yeah.
It's going to happen with a lot of Jackie's understanding, I'll tell you that. I want to make a full-scale model of the fission bomb used to destroy Hiroshima. And the reason for that is, I think if people see it, it'll become more real, because the contrast then will be, here's what happens when a conventional explosion is detonated, here's what happened when a nuclear explosion is detonated, such as the 15 kiloton weapon that destroyed the city of Hiroshima. And then you can contrast that with the weapons they have, instead of 15 kilotons, 400 kilotons, which is most of the weapons that are in the inventory. So if you think about the progress of this, it's just unimaginable. And so to me, doing a full-scale mock-up of the weapon, showing how it works, actually showing how the physics work, which sounds complicated, but it's not, it's very simple, I think will draw interest, and I'm hoping that our group will expand greatly, because I think that'll be an attraction, and then contrasting that with the destruction, I think will be very powerful. So that was my hope, and that I plan to do that in February.
Good.
Need help building it?
Yes, he does. Thank you for asking.
Only if we can talk about Cooley, that's a great one. Yeah.
You can do it while you work.
Sounds like a go. Yeah. Okay, so did we decide we're gonna have a Zoom meeting to talk about this with Sean about the 26th? Do we wanna set that up now, or?
Find out what our responsibility is.
Yeah,
Well, this would be an informative meeting, I think, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
Jackie can
and
set it
so
up.
do you
No,
ask him
Julia's
when
the
he's
one that sets
available
them up.
first, or?
Yeah, we'd have to contact him,
Or
that'd be the key.
Kathleen or Julia is more valuable, sets
Kathleen will set up the Zoom.
Yes,
meeting,
thank you.
and, I can contact Sean and see a couple days.
Yeah.
I did propose a couple days, I don't remember what they were now, I think Monday and Wednesday next week. That is what I proposed, that's a big deal, is that the 11th or the, no. this is
11th and 13th, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I will, contact Sean and see if either one of those dates works for him, but does it work for us, either one of those days?
Is that your board meeting? Is that
Yeah,
what
Monday.
it is? Yeah.
Monday,
So
5 to
Wednesday
7.
would be better.
Wednesday would be better for me.
Wednesday would be better.
Okay,
Okay, so
Sounds
I'll
good.
ask him if that works for
Yeah.
him.
good, thank you. Good.
Well, thank you so much. That
Yeah,
was
thanks,
really-
Teresa.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for sitting through it all. And I'll get this to Bill for the website, and what I usually do is I also save a PDF version, because that's a smaller file and easy, you can email that, somebody else like that. We'll put that on the website too. Thank you all for
Good.
participating.